Okay, we have all been there. You know the feeling. The alerts are just screaming, the dashboard is a sea of red, and some critical system is completely down. It is just a super stressful, high-stakes moment. And then in the aftermath, as the dust finally settles, a really familiar and kind of painful process usually begins. Just think about it for a second. After all the immediate firefighting is over, and you're trying to piece together what on earth just happened, what's that very first question that pops into your head? Or, gets asked in the Slack channel? It's almost a reflex, right? And there it is. Who did this? I mean, this question, while it feels completely natural, is probably the single most destructive starting point for any real investigation. It immediately frames the problem around a person, not the system, and it kicks off this vicious cycle of fear and defensiveness. But why are we so wired to ask it? All right, so let's dive into this a little deeper. Blaming someone isn't just, a sign of a bad manager or a toxic culture. It's actually a deeply ingrained human instinct. And to understand how to fix it, we first have to get a handle on the psychological forces that are really at play. So it turns out our tendency to blame is often driven by these really powerful, totally unconscious biases. They're what make pointing the finger feel so right, even when it's completely counterproductive to actually solving the problem for good. So let's take a look at the first of these two hidden forces. First up, we've got hindsight bias. You know this one. After an incident, it's so easy to look back and think, well, of course that was going to fail. It was so obvious. This bias makes us completely forget that the people involved didn't have the benefit of our perfect 2020 hindsight. It makes a really complex failure seem simple, and a simple failure seem like just plain old negligence. Okay, the second factor is something called discomfort discharge. This one is fascinating. On a biological level, outages are painful, they're stressful, and blaming someone is a really primal, super quick way to just discharge that discomfort and make ourselves feel better, to literally shift that painful feeling onto somebody else. We're actually wired to do it. And you can see the result right here. I mean, the contrast is just night and day. When blame becomes the default, you get a culture of low psychological safety. People are terrified to speak up, to try new things, to admit they made a mistake. Innovation just grinds to a halt. But in a high-safety environment where failure is treated as a chance to learn, people collaborate, information flows freely, and the whole organization gets smarter and way more resilient. So if who did this is the wrong question, what's the right way to investigate a failure? Well, the Site Reliability Engineering, or SRE world, has a really powerful answer: a structured and, most importantly, blameless postmortem. Now, the absolute key to a blameless postmortem is that it's not about finding a scapegoat. Not at all. It's a systematic process to make sure the team collectively learns from whatever happened. The focus shifts entirely from the person who might have made an error to the system and the processes that allowed the error to happen in the first place. And hey, this isn't just some casual chat over coffee. It's a structured process with a clear written output. You start with just the facts: what happened and when. Then you quantify the impact. How did this affect our users? Then you dig, and I mean really dig, for all the contributing root causes, because there are almost always more than one. Finally, you document how you fixed it, and, this is critical, you assign concrete follow-up actions to prevent it from ever happening again. And here's why this whole process is such a game changer. By digging deep, you move past the easy, obvious culprit to find the real systemic weaknesses. You get to avoid those quick patchwork Band-Aid fixes that just make the system more complex and brittle over time. It makes your system stronger and, honestly, your team calmer, because every single failure becomes a documented lesson that everyone can learn from. Now, here's the thing. A blameless process just can't exist in a blame-filled culture. It won't work. For this to truly take root, you absolutely need a foundation of what's called psychological safety. And that foundation, it has to be laid by the leaders. This is such a critical distinction to make. Blamelessness isn't just some nice idea. It's the consistent behavior that leaders model and teams practice every day. And when you do that over and over, the outcome you get is psychological safety, that shared belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or even mistakes. So how do leaders actually do it? Well, it's surprisingly straightforward. First, you frame the work by saying something like, look, we're dealing with incredibly complex systems here, and there's a lot of uncertainty. We need everyone's brains to figure this out. Second, you have to admit you're not perfect.
Just saying, I might miss something, so I really need you to speak up is incredibly powerful. And finally, you have to be the most curious person in the room. Always be asking questions instead of just dishing out answers.
And listen, the benefits aren't just fuzzy, feel-good cultural stuff. They translate directly to operational excellence. I mean, research clearly shows that teams with high psychological safety have faster recovery times after failures, they can deploy changes more frequently, and their overall lead times improve. Cooperation and innovation aren't just buzzwords on a poster. They are measurable outcomes of a healthy culture. So, when you boil it all down, this whole approach comes down to one fundamental philosophical shift in how you view failure. It's all about moving away from hunting for culprits and toward a relentless, passionate search for causes. And here it is. This is the core of this entire explainer, right on this slide. In a blame culture, the question is always who, and the focus is on the person. But in a learning culture, the question becomes what. What in our system, what in our process allowed this to happen? The focus shifts completely from the person to the environment they operate in. It's such a simple change in language, but it represents a massive, massive change in mindset. This quote from Google's SRE handbook just captures the guiding principle perfectly. You have to start with the core assumption that nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. People make the best decisions they can with the information and the tools they have at that moment. The real gold is in figuring out why the information was misleading or why the tool was inadequate. That's where the learning is. So, I'll leave you with this one question to think about. The next time an incident happens at your organization, just listen. Listen really carefully to the conversations that follow. Are you hunting for a person to blame, or are you hunting for a lesson that will make your entire team and your entire system stronger? The answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know about your culture.